I can't recall the particular circumstances that landed me in the Director of Student Activities office in the spring of 1970. I do know that it had something to do with my role as social chairman of Phi Delta Theta. It could have been that the party had gone on too long, that the music was too loud, or the distinct possibility that there might have been alcohol present. Or it could have been those 8mm films from Mexico that we let the Kappa Sig show in our basement. Whatever the reason, that day for me, a pre-law major with a pretty poor academic record and no idea of what I wanted to do, was an epiphany, a revelation. During that visit, it seemed that the clouds opened up, the sun shone through, the angels sang, and I realized that somebody had to do what that guy sitting across the desk from me was doing. Soon after, I started looking into what I needed to do to get into higher education, and decided very early on that one day I was going to be the Dean of Students at Ole Miss. As I said, my first day on the job was August 15th, 1977, and since that time, it's been a blessed, fulfilling, fun, unpredictable, long, strange trip. Here's what it's been like. I've outlasted 3 chancellors, 6 vice chancellors of student affairs, 7 head football coaches, and 4 popes. On a daily basis, I've had the opportunity to encounter Eli, Deuce, Patrick Willis, Stephen Head, David DeLutri, Drew Pomerantz, Peggy and Jennifer Gillum, Gerald Glass, Michael White, or Marshall Henderson. And some of these would have been an encounter by my invitation in my office. Bear with me here. I've witnessed the pike haircut, the butt cut, big hair, hiking boots, chacos and flip-flops, the preppy handbook, planking, spanking, juicy campus, Brother Jim, the KKK, the skinheads, Animal House, the Hangover, the Society for Creative Anachronism, the Ole Miss Pagans, potato guns, surgical tubing, slingshots, beer funnels, pledges fishing in the Phi Mu fountain, flash mobs in the Union, raves in the library, streakers at football games, home run showers in right field, looking for the doorknob of the universe, crawling through the steam tunnels, and a mascot selection. I've been the advisor to the Ole Miss Lacrosse Club, the Ole Miss Cheerleaders, and helped found the Ole Miss American Chinese Association. That's true. I've survived the IHL board, the legislature, the student senate, and the faculty senate, so take that. I've tolerated reporters from the Daily Mississippi and the Clarion Ledger, the New York Times, and Mississippi Public Broadcasting. The soundtrack of my experience has ranged from the Carolina beach music to rap to hip-hop to disco and country to alternative to classic, rock and roll to jam bands, and now to something that I'll never understand called techno-pop. I watched and prayed as our students have marched off to 3 wars in Iraq, Kuwait, and Afghanistan. I survived the pending doom of Y2K, the swine flu, killer bees, the ice storm of '94, the earthquake prediction of 1990, and the remnants of Hurricane Katrina. I spent many a Friday or Saturday night waiting for Patty Murphy or Derby Day or Ivy League or South Sea Island to come to an end. I followed the horses in the Old South Parade and had been to Fraternity Row with UPD at 4 o'clock in the morning. I chaperoned train trips to New Orleans and partied in the stands with joyous Rebel fans when we beat LSU. I was the guest bench coach at Tad Pad when the Rebels beat the #1 Kentucky basketball team. I fought back tears for the Rebels baseball team when Stephen Head went down swinging against Texas in the Super Regionals. I practiced restraint during Egg Bowl week. Even though I did do somersaults coming out of Memorial Stadium in Jackson after the wind blew the field goal back in 1994. I high-fived everybody around me on a cold, snowy November day during the stand in Vaught Hemingway Stadium. And I flirted with death by cowbell by dancing in the aisles after the two-point conversion in Starkville. One morning I woke to find the holy trinity of roadkill in the front seat of my car: a possum, a raccoon, and a squirrel. I watched in anguish as students knelt in the lobby of the Union on September 11th, 2001. I have received scotch for Christmas from many student groups. I've made students pour out scotch. And way back when, in a kinder, more reasonable, more gentle time, I taught students how to drink scotch. Like gentlemen, Moon. I brought in concerts with the likes of Jimmy Buffett, the Commodores, B.B. King, and R.E.M. I planned pep rallies and picnics and vigils, organized a Grove Festival for the presidential debate in 2008, and put on a little party out at Sardis Dam for 4 years called Shrimp and Beer. I was pageant director for two Miss University pageants, one which produced a first runner-up and another which produced a Miss America. I've sat in dunking booths, kissed pigs, judged talent and chili cooking contests, interviewed incoming scholars, called names at Who's Who and Honors Day, and been treated to more free crawfish, barbecue, roast beef, green beans, and rice than any man could ever want. But, you might ask, what does the Dean of Students really do? I've been asked that question so many times that early on I came up with a pat answer. I told anyone that asked, well, every day I work with CEOs and doctors and lawyers and educators, engineers, senators, ministers, and criminals. I always like to think that I might be working with the person who would write the next great American novel, or who would find a cure for the incurable, or notice an obvious wrong and make it right, or broker peace in the Middle East, or balance the budget, or even occupy the Oval Office. A saying of which I'm very fond says, sometimes you plant the seed of a tree in whose shade you will never sit. As I look around the room tonight and look at some of the emails and notes that have come in over the last couple of weeks, I realize that that answer, even though padded and flippant at first, was really the right one. I look at you, many of you, and I see CEOs and doctors and lawyers and bankers and educators, engineers and ministers, professional athletes. Most of all, I see mothers and fathers. And I'm sure that the criminals would be here if they could. All of you make me very proud and humble. And I don't think I ever realized way back when, or what seems like way back when, that it's very powerful when you think of somebody in my position and what they do. Who knew that I would have the opportunity to work with and teach Dixie Carter Salinas, who is the president of TNA Wrestling, or with David Watkins, who did a Bud Light commercial. I'm proud that my former student Woody Sawyer is the mayor of Lyon, Mississippi, and that Sean and Leanne Toohey, through their kindness and generosity, would inspire millions through a book and a movie called The Blind Side. I never expected that an old Daily Mississippian editor, sports editor, Bill Courtney, would become the subject of an Academy Award-winning documentary called The Undefeated, and he would go on to become an inspirational speaker and an author. I look at my friend Rose Jackson from Laurel, an executive with FedEx, and see a person who means more to Memphis and more to this university than anybody knows. I see students who go out and give 2 years of their life to teach for America or Peace Corps. I see my friend Tate Taylor, a the greatest social chairman of all time, by the way. And remember when he called me and said he was leaving the corporate world, and he said, I want to come talk to you. So he came to my house and we talked. He said, I want to get in the entertainment business. I thought, you're crazy as hell. You got a good job. You're making all kind of money. But after Mexican food and copious amount of margaritas and hours of conversation, I think I just went Nike on him and said, Tate, just do it. I've never been prouder as when I was than to attend the opening of the Help in Los Angeles and see Tate's dream come full circle. To think that I worked with a student who now works with the likes of Mick Jagger and Brian Glazer. He's working on a movie on the biography of James Brown called Get On Up. It'll be out in August. And so I've seen the trailer, and it looks like it's going to be fun. So, Tate, get back with your bad self.
Thank you.
Okay? I once heard a quote that said, college is the place where the person you are meets the person you will be. I really like that and realize that in the truest sense of the student affairs tradition, that it was my opportunity, my obligation, and my blessing to help with those introductions. Any success that I have had as the Dean of Student is a product of the place and environment where I was raised, of the influence of family and friends, of the lessons of life experiences, and of a loving God who gave me the wisdom to sometimes have the right answer, to sustain me when I didn't, and the strength to get up after I fell. And so that was a thank you that I omitted at the beginning, and I have to be very honest with you. Usually when I would watch sporting events or the Academy Awards and somebody would start by thanking God, I'd say, come on, show the losing dressing room. I want to see a replay. Let's get on with it. You don't have to do that. But as I stand here tonight, I would be really, really remiss if I didn't know that there was a higher power that moved in my life more times than I knew. And I thank God for his inspiration.
Yeah.
If I were to recall a book that I'd read in the last 10 years that had a profound influence on me, it would be Mitch Albom's Tuesday with Maury. It's the story of a student's regular Tuesday visits with his former professor who is dying of Lou Gehrig's disease. To me, the most powerful quote in that powerful book is one that hangs in my office. It was painted by a parent and given to me. It says, do the kinds of things that come from the heart. When you do, you won't be dissatisfied. You won't be envious. You won't be longing for somebody else's things. On the contrary, you'll be overwhelmed with what comes back. As I stand here tonight, I count myself blessed to have had the opportunity that I have lived for the last 36 years. I've never longed for another job or envied others' positions in life. I'm completely satisfied, and most of all, tonight, I'm overwhelmed with what has come back. Maury also told Mitch, devote yourself to loving others, devote yourself to the community around you, and devote yourself to creating something that gives you purpose and meaning. I pray that I've done that. I want to close tonight with a story that I've told hundreds of times throughout the country as I've spoken to students about everything from leadership to crisis management and risk management. And I tell this story because it was another revelation or epiphany born out of pain that shaped my philosophy of working with students as dean. 1987 was a painful year at the University of Mississippi for me and many others. We just observed the anniversary of the Chi Omega accident that happened in March of that year. I'll tell you this, I think that I grew up that spring. But even something that was right after that, on a beautiful spring day, I had one of the students in my class walking around Fraternity Row, and I was riding around looking for a keg to pour out, and a student walked up to me and he said, "Hey, I want you to meet this guy." And he brought a student over to me and said, "This is Skip, he's from my hometown." And he was a family friend, and so Skip got my phone number, and he started calling me on and off during the spring. He came to Ole Miss, met his parents, had dinner with Skip and his parents during that summer when they came back for a visit. And then he showed up in the fall. He was like a lot of students, like many of you who felt like you could come into my office and talk about things. But he was really a very special young man. And he'd walk into my office with his backpack, t-shirt, old beat-up khakis, Varney hat. He'd drop his backpack on the floor, put his feet up on my couch and go. He would have one-word conversations, girls, or, money, or something like that. On October 7th, 1987, if you live in Mississippi, you know that August and September can be particularly cruel. It's hot, it's dusty, it's muggy, and you just keep waiting for that day. You know the one I'm talking about? Where the weather breaks and it's cool, and you walk outside and you got your sweater, and you see couples holding hands and kicking leaves, and the alma maters playing over the smoke, and you hear the band practicing. You walk out there and fall is here, and you just want to go, hell yeah. That hell yeah kind of day. It was one of those days, but that morning when I got to the office, Judy said, "Sparky, you need to go to the hospital." She said, "There's been a young man who fell down the steps at his fraternity house, and he's gone to the hospital." And I said, she told me the fraternity, and I said, "Was it Skip?" And she said, "Yes." And so I went to the hospital, and when I got there, the president of the fraternity and I prayed in the parking lot for strength as we waited on his parents to come in. I'm glad we did, because that's the only thing that sustained us. The trauma nurse said, "You want to come back and see him?" And I went back to see him. When I did, this is where I changed, because I saw a young man lying there, his swimmer's chest being pumped by a machine, and I thought, it doesn't make any difference. No matter how many programs you do, no matter how many discipline cases you hear, it just doesn't make any difference. I also realized that time was the one great commodity given to us by our Creator over which we have no control. We can take a dark room and make it lighter. We can take a warm room and make it cooler. We can do many things, but when time's up, you can't do it. And I didn't know if I wanted to spend my time not being able to make a difference. When I gave Skip's eulogy at his funeral, I remember telling him that if they gave All-American honors for smiling, that Skip Klein would have won the Heisman Trophy. Came back to that first day and went about the unpleasant business of investigations, of comforting people, supporting people, talking to the press. And that Friday, my phone rang in the office when Judy and I were in the glass offices in the Union, and it was the nurse, the trauma nurse, who had let me see him. And she told me that they had taken him off of life support. And I sat in my office and I cried. Now, Jim Valvano says you ought to do three things every day. One, you ought to laugh, you ought to think, and you ought to cry. And that was my time to cry. I didn't know what to do, so I called my friend Duncan Gray, who was the rector at the Episcopal Church. Duncan and I were classmates. And I said, "Duncan, I'm quitting. I'm getting out of here." It's really the only time that I ever thought about quitting my job at Ole Miss. And he started laughing. Not exactly what I needed. He said, "You're not going to quit." He said, "You're not going to quit." And I said, "What makes you say that?" He said, "You're not." He said, "Let me tell you a story. Every speech I've given, every chance I've had, I've told this story because I think it's so poignant and so meaningful, and so indicative of what we do in student affairs. It was a story of a man who was standing on the dune, and he was looking down at the seashore, and there was a boy down there, and he was walking along the seashore, and the man was interested, and he walked down and he asked the boy, said, "What are you doing?" And the boy said, "Well, the tide went out and there was a storm last night, and all these starfish have been washed up on the shore." And the man said, "Well, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm throwing them back in so that they can live." And the man started laughing. He said, "Boy, you know it's not going to make any difference." The boy said, "Yeah, that's what my dad said." And the man said, "I'm serious, it's not going to make any difference." And the boy looked at the big starfish in his hand, and he threw it back in, and he said, "I just made a difference to that one." If in my time at Ole Miss, I made a difference in the life of even one student by word or action or example, then I leave this job with a peaceful mind, with a grateful heart, and with a contented spirit, and I can say what Lou Gehrig said, "Today, I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth." Thank you.